Welcome to Post-Traumatic Thriving, where we explore life's toughest issues, along with the art, science, and stories of resilience. Please be advised that our guests share their raw stories of addiction, abuse, crime, and tragedy, along with tips to survive and thrive. And now, here are our hosts, Dr.RandallBell and Tanya Brown.
Hello, and welcome back to Post-Traumatic Thriving. I'm Dr. Bell. Welcome to our guest, Rhonda Hart. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. And there's a obvious person missing, Tanya Brown. Very sadly, her nephew passed away a few days ago. And so as appropriately she's with her family. So our condolences and our heartfelt love and concern and prayers go to Tanya and her sister Dominique, who lost her son, and the entire Brown family. So we will miss Tanya, but we will keep going with our interview of Rhonda Hart. So this is the Thrive episode, Rhonda, and I guess the first question I've got for you is, was there a moment where you went from kind of survival mode, which we talked about in the last episode, into where you clearly saw that you were into a thrive mode, that there was a fire within you and that there was something to be done?
I mean, that fire was always there. Like, I knew even the night of the shooting, I was like, this is a problem with Congress or the Senate or the president or somebody. And I remember speaking at my first March for Our Lives rally, and it was probably like 30 days post shooting, and I was really super emotional. But I pretty much hit the ground running with joining different activism groups. And then I would say like the first landmark of the shooting, that's when I started to feel a little bit better. You know, I had gone through a lot of therapy. And then I think by the second year, I was pretty much coping with it. You know, we have a routine where on Landmark or like Kimberly's birthday, we have a different routine now. And so we go and do something distracting in the morning, and then like we'll get lunch, and then the afternoon is kind of for contemplation and stuff. So yeah, I'd say probably about that second year. Okay.
And so tell us about who formed the march. Was that something you were involved in forming, or how did that come to be?
The March for Our Lives, that's started by well, I can call them young adults now because they are. 4 years ago, they were high school students. But so the shooting in Parkland, Florida happened on February 14th, and those kids just went right into overdrive and started March for Our Lives, which is now a national-wide movement. And they had reached out to me, you know, as a most recent shooting survivor, and wanted me to come and speak at one of their rallies in June. And I've worked with them off and on, you know, for several years. They're like my surrogate kids, because they're all now, you know, 19 and 20, and that's, you know, Kimberly would be 19 right now. So they're all pretty much my surrogate young adults.
Yeah.
And I work with them whenever I can, whenever they reach out, and like if my schedule aligns with them, I will, you know, I'll do an event with them. I also really got to working this summer with Newtown Action Alliance, which is based out of Sandy Hook, and worked with them to lobby quite a bit over the summer and spring and summer. Yeah, I hate to say it, but after Uvalde happened, that really kicked everything into overdrive. And we really started to get some traction on the Newtown Action Alliance stuff that we had been pushing.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't realize when they're watching the news and they see these horrible shootings is, and it's not just the school shootings, which are probably, I mean, it's not a competition, but it's certainly beyond horrific. It's off the chart. But whether it's that or a hurricane or a landslide or whatever it is, you see the story, most people feel very badly, and then they change the channel and it's kind of over in their minds. But what they don't realize is that for even today, years after Hurricane Katrina, years after Hurricane Harvey, there's still people that are rebuilding their houses, literally years later, because they don't have the money. The hurricane wiped out their livelihood, their jobs, their community, and they're struggling for years. And then with the loss of a child, it's a whole different league of that. You can't repair that ever.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to convey, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that after people watch these news stories and it goes through the news cycle, it's still a lingering issue for the families involved forever. And I just kind of want to point that out to give some perspective. I worked on Sandy Hook, and I've worked on a few mass shooting cases with what I do, the Pulse nightclub. And it's just, it just ripples out, the trauma ripples out year after year after year, the aftermath. But it sounds like just a month after you were already involved in these rallies. That's pretty quick.
Yeah. And it was very, it's sometimes when you're in that, you're in that huge grief moment, it's so cathartic to go and like yell and scream and protest. It just kind of releases all that anger for you. And like I said, I had known enough about politics after our shooting. I knew that this was like a national problem, and I knew I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know how. So that's why I started, like I joined with Moms Demand Action. That's why I, did all those groups. And those folks are also like a built-in support system. They understand what's going on, and they're just a great little like tribe of people to know. Well, and
the school shooting where Kimberly lost her life, that was a very well publicized event. I certainly heard about it in California.
No, it was, but only for like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And at some point, the community, the town of Santa Fe actually started rejecting media interviews and, turning their backs on the media. And they just didn't want to talk about it. They thought that they were going to be able to fix it on their level. They thought that for sure the school board would do something and the principal would resign and, all this stuff would happen. The superintendent would leave, and they didn't. Everybody stayed on board. And that was when I really started to like distance myself away from the city of Santa Fe. And I only go down there like if I have to. My son attends once a month. My son attends a Pokemon Club card game thing that he actually started it 5 years ago at the library. So every month we go down to the library so he can play his Pokemon game. But I don't go down there like really unless I absolutely have to, and I live 10 or 15 minutes away.
So I think right there is kind of a tip for people that who are working through a trauma to realize where you're comfortable, where you're not. And if you're not comfortable, make some changes.
Yeah. You don't have to attend every fight you've been invited to. And it is perfectly acceptable to say, no, I don't want to work with you, and you're totally allowed to do that. I give that advice to so many survivors. It's not even funny. Yeah,
that's good advice. It reminds me of a phrase, no is a complete sentence. You have the right to say no.
Yep. Yeah. And, I just, a few weeks ago, I just got to meet some of the Uvalde families, and, they're trying to figure out about we were sitting there having dinner, and they were trying to figure out about a mural or something and what pictures they should put on this mural and where should it go. And I just said, you know what, guys, if you don't want to do it, tell them no, you don't have to do it. There's this whole like thing that happens with the mass shooting where your kid dies or your loved one dies, and then like the media in general and the public just thinks that they have the right to use your kid's name and your kid's image and, you know, just anything that they can snatch up, you know, from online. And that happened to me. And you know, like Kimberly's name would get plastered all over town. And I'm like, you know what? That doesn't make me feel good. I don't want her name all over town for this. And so I put my foot down with several organizations, and I was like, nope, you're not going to use it. So I tell them now, if you absolutely think that you need to use Kimberly for anything, you can use her initials. And then like my congressman was a complete douchebag when I talked to him over the summer about Kimberly's bill. And I thought about it for a few weeks, and I ended up emailing his chief of staff. And I said, you know what? I felt so disrespected in that meeting that we had. I said, I don't want your boss to ever mention my kid's name again. Not in a bill, not on the House floor, not in a stump speech, nothing. I don't even want you to release an image of my kid's name, nothing. And she was like, oh, okay, I get it. I mean, like, I got really bitchy with my congressman, and that felt really good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you know, so I guess what I'm hearing out of this is that people in the aftermath of a tragedy, you know, do all kinds of things. The amygdala in the brain is turned on, and that's the reptilian brain, and a lot of interesting instincts come out. My point is that what I'm hearing you say is that if before you use somebody's name or before you talk about it, ask permission. Show some respect is what I kind of hear you saying. Yeah. And also stand up for yourself. If you happen to be on the other end of the line, it's okay to speak up and say, I'm not okay with that. Yeah. Okay. Well, and the other thing about school shootings is that when I was working on some of these cases, we were given a list of school shootings around the country, and I nearly fell off my chair. I was so astounded with how many there are, and that don't get publicized. Did you get familiar with the statistics of what's really going on in that whole arena? Yeah.
So right after Santa Fe, there were a couple of smaller ones, like at because ours was on May 18th. And so there was a couple other incidents between ours and then I can't even remember what the next school shooting was, but one of the next mass shootings was the country music club in Thousand Oaks. And I made contact with one of those moms pretty quickly after that shooting. But you're right, they just all kind of blend together. And then there was one at some point, there was the STEM school in Colorado. And then probably some more in between. I'd have to look exactly, but then obviously Uvalde was just the most recent one.
Yeah. And then I hate to ask this question, but I feel like I need to. With Sandy Hook, with the meetings I have with the mayor and the community people and so forth, there were some very odd conspiracy theories that came out with Sandy Hook in particular. And what people don't realize is that these are real people behind these statistics. These are real children that lost their lives in the most horrific of circumstances. And this is very real grief. And the last thing that people need are some, ridiculous conspiracy theories to add to the trauma behind these real people. And I was involved in Adam Lanza's house, and I was doing a number of things, and out came a conspiracy theory and my name was attached to it because the date that the house transfer was filed was numerically lined up with some ridiculous conspiracy theory that there was a plot. And I thought, I know for a fact, there was no coordination to do any such thing. That was didn't even occur to me or anybody that I was associated with. And so I know that these conspiracy theories are a lot of times just utterly ridiculous, and B, very hurtful, and C, untrue. Did that come up in your case at all, or were you alleviated from that nonsense?
So it did not happen to me specifically. I was very guarded with Kimberly's celebration of life and her funeral that we had at the church. We even had, I think almost everybody had sheriffs and police support the day of their funerals, just in case, like to handle traffic, but just in case something went down, they were there. Now, there was a family that had decided to live stream their child's funeral because they had family in other parts of the state. And there was a conspiracy, and they had so they live streamed their funeral. And there was a conspiracy theory group that had grabbed screenshots of the proceedings, and they compared the photos of the kid in his casket with the photos of what he was in real life. And it just got really super nasty for them. But as a whole, we didn't get that conspiracy theory shit because it was a rural town in Texas. Everybody's going to have a gun, so we didn't get a lot of that. And I don't think we, no.
Okay,
if we
good.
did, no. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess the
but
point
Alex Jones is a douche. I know who you're talking about.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is really mind-boggling. I mean, my background's both economics and sociology, and from a sociological point of view, it's really odd to see with just about, I don't want to say every disaster, but with most disasters, there's a group of people, there's a segment of society that believes in Bigfoot, there's a segment of society that believes the earth is flat, and there's a segment of society that believes that every disaster is the result of some, new world order, manipulation. And
those people can blow it out their ear. If you're making fun of a family and you're coming up with conspiracy theories about dead children, there's a special spot in hell for you.
Yeah.
There really is.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Interesting. So you're getting involved in the marches, and that from a healing perspective is really important because it sounds like what you're doing is you're taking that grief, you're taking that sadness, you're taking that anger and that rage, all these emotions, but you're giving them a channel to go to that's productive and healthy. Do you want to talk about that kind of direction that your life is taking at that point and at this point?
Yeah. So it is very productive to join in these movements. It's really great and there are a ton of gun violence prevention groups out there, and people just really have to, find the one that fits with them and what they want to do. And so lately I've been working with Newtown Action Alliance, and Poe Murray is the creator of that. And she doesn't mess around. I tell you what, she is very good at getting meetings with representatives and senators. And there is something, like I said, it's very cathartic to sit down and talk to a senator and tell your story and actually have them listen and support you. And I had made friends with Shahira, and she's the cousin of Sabika Sheik. We had been because she was working in Washington, D.C. for a little while. And I had made friends with Shahira in 2019. And pretty soon after, it was 2018. Anyway, I can't remember. But anyway, shortly after I met Shahira, she started working with Sheila Jackson Lee. I started working with her too. And Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas had drafted a few bills for Santa Fe. And so then it was like, okay, this bill exists. I'm going to start lobbying on my own and just working the connections that I had, like through Eric Swalwell and Julian Castro and things like that, through all these people that I had met. I got invited to the State of the Union address. I think it was 2019. Yeah, it was like February 2019, because we had that big 6-week government shutdown where the Coast Guard and TSA wasn't getting paid. And so, yeah, it was right about probably 2019. I got really into lobbying for Kimberly's bill, and it did not get introduced into that congressional period. But when we came back for the next session, it got redrafted and revamped a little bit. And then Newtown Action Alliance started picking it up, and we ran with Kimberly's bill and Ethan's law together. And from there, it just snowballed for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
To the point where this summer we went. So it was after Uvalde. This summer we went to. So it was early June. We went to Washington D.C. to lobby for the Protect Our Kids Act, I think it was called, and it was a omnibus package of 8 bills, including Kimberly's law, Ethan's law. We had a bump stock ban, raise the age to purchase AR-15s. We had a freeze on selling AR-15s, and that's the one that passed in the House in the early June, and then it got turned into the Building Safer Communities Act that passed the Senate in July. So yeah, I had a direct hand in that. That was pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah, that's super cool. Not everyone, I certainly have never been invited to a State of the Union address. Let's back up and talk about, how you were notified and what it was like to go to DC and go to that event. So
I had, during the 2018 congressional campaign, I had been contacted by Lizzie Fletcher's office, Lizzie Panel Fletcher, and my friend Marcel McClinton and I would go up to different offices around the Houston area, and we would, before the next shift of there'd be a changing of the volunteer shift. And so my friend Marcel and I would get there before the official shift, and we would rally the troops and tell them our story, because Marcel's a shooting survivor too. Mm-hmm. And rev up their spirits. And so in 2019 Congresswoman Lizzie Panel Fletcher reached out to me. She called me personally on my phone, which was bonkers, and she invited me to State of the Union address, and that was so cool, because they flew me out to Washington, D.C. They put me up in the hotel. I got to meet, obviously, with the Congresswoman. And then I said, I would also really love to meet Lucy Macbeth from Georgia, if you could make that happen. And so Lucy Macbeth is another mom that lost her kid to gun violence. And her seat actually used to be held by Newt Gingrich. That's how Ruby red it was, and she ran on a gun violence platform and won. And then later on that night, we walked through there's all these tunnels to get, once you get in a building, you get in the Cannon building, there's all these tunnels that connect you to Longworth or whatever. And so you can go through security at one time and then just walk in these hamster tunnels and get to the next building that you need to. And so we went through the tunnels, we went over to the Capitol building, and then you have to go through obviously security and all that. You can't take your phone. I had to leave my phone with the Congresswoman's secretary or whatever. And we went back into Nancy Pelosi's office. She was Speaker of the House then. And she just has these like this office suite of several rooms, and it's amazing. And there's all these little hors d'oeuvres and little nibbles and drinks and all these Congress people running around. And it was the year that Donald Trump had banned transgender people from being in the military. And so a lot of the thing with the State of the Union address is that the representatives you're allowed to pick two guests, and people usually take their spouse and then someone that they want to like give a middle finger to the current administration.
Okay.
And so like you're essentially, so like the spouse is there, but then the other person that's invited, like from the community where you live, is usually some kind of activist or something that's an issue that's important at the time. And so you're essentially like arm candy. And I knew that going in. I knew that, guns was a big issue at that time. Mm-hmm. I knew going in that I was, going to be arm candy for the representative. And I didn't care because it was State of the Union.
Yeah.
But it was the time where Donald Trump had banned transgender people from serving in the military. So there were several transgendered folks at the party. And then also during that whole debacle, the U.S. Coast Guard hadn't got paid because they fall in this gray area. They're not Department of Homeland Security, or they're Department of Homeland Security, but they're not DOD. And so they went for like 6 weeks without getting paid. So anyway, there's like a ton of Coast Guard people and like a ton of gun violence survivors too, because those were all really hot button issues in 2019. And it was just wild to be there. I was like up in the balcony and you could like see everybody trickle in and you're like, oh, there's Ted Cruz, and oh, there's, Lisa Murkowski, and oh, look what Elizabeth Warren is wearing. And just like the pomp and circumstance of it was like so cool, because the sergeant at arms comes down and he's like, here's the Supreme Court of the United States. And Brett Kavanaugh had just came in and got sworn in, and like nobody wanted to talk to Brett Kavanaugh.
Oh, wow.
And then, and then you just have to sit there and listen to Donald Trump, for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But I was seated like right in front. I was right behind the major television screens that were filming it. And so Donald Trump would be talking about socialism or something, and the camera would click over to Bernie Sanders, where you could just see Bernie like giving him the evil eye. And
so you're watching all the power dynamics of DC.
Yeah, but it all in all, it was super cool, once in a lifetime, thing. And so, I mean, I would love to go back again. So if any representative is listening to this podcast and wants arm candy gun violence survivor, I am down.
You're down to be arm candy. All right.
Yeah.
let me that thanks for that's a fascinating insight what that looks like. I got a question though, and that is, can you explain? I know that you're lobbying and you're advocating for gun control. Can you lay out exactly what you're for and against, and what exactly that looks like in the specifics of gun violence in your cause?
So what I lobby for, my 4 or 5 principles are a universal background check. And I get this all the time, and people tell me, oh, there already is a universal background check. But there's holes in the system that are so big that you can drive a tank through. Mm-hmm. And so we need to tie up all of those nifty little holes, like the Charleston loophole and the private seller loophole and the gun show loophole and all of this. My biggest component is safe storage. And that's what Kimberly's bill focuses on, is safe storage education. And our shooting specifically would not have happened if the dad had took the time to put the guns in a lockbox or a safe, or if he had trigger locks and cable locks on his equipment. Mm-hmm. And so that is my primary thing that I lobby for. And then I also push for extreme risk protection orders or ERPOs, red flag laws. And that means that if you're not feeling well or your family member's not feeling well and you think you might be a danger to somebody, there's a process you go through with the courts and they temporarily take away your guns. Because in our case, again, the dad knew his child wasn't well mentally and had taken a couple weeks off of work to be with his kid and keep an eye on him. And as soon as the dad went back to work is when the shooting happened. And so either the guns needed to be not in that house at the police station or wherever, or the kid needed to be away from the guns. Yeah. Either one. And then the fourth thing that I really advocate for is, and I don't know, there's more than one way to tackle this issue, is I don't think that the general public needs to have access to the AR-15 or AK-47 style weapons. And I don't know what that looks like, if there needs to be an increased background check, if we need to raise the age to purchase from 18 to 21 or even 25, if we raise the price of it, or we just stop selling it altogether. I just have fired that weapon when I was in the military, and it's just too much for the guy down the road to have. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then kind of the fifth thing I think that I'm a big fan of is limiting the ability to purchase guns and ammunition. Like if you, what happened in our case was the shooter had purchased a gift card that expired in like 6 or 8 years, used an American Express gift card with no tracing number, no nothing. And he bought his ammunition online without any kind of background check or anything. And American Express just like went for it. You know, like they just let him make this purchase. Mm-hmm. And then like FedEx didn't ask for an adult signature when they delivered it. So just a way of tracking, you know, like, ooh, you've bought so many guns in this amount of time. Like, ooh, that's a red flag. Mm-hmm. Or credit card companies not being allowed to, you can't use your credit card to purchase a gun or whatever, you know what I mean? So there's got to be like a financial control aspect to it too. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know exactly like what that looks like yet.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, our show here is not a political show at all. It's about healing from trauma. But what's interesting from what I hear you saying, Rhonda, is that you're not anti-gun. That's not the issue. There's already millions of guns in our country. It's about more safe and sane handling of the guns and keeping the guns out of the hands of kids, but in any kid, but particularly troubled kids. And you know, I'll just say, because you know, I own a lot of guns, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with guns, and I get that, but they're all under double lock. I've been through several rounds of gun training. I know how to handle a gun. I know how to lock it away. It's never accessible to my kids. And so everything you're talking about as a gun owner, I don't see a problem with that. Who would be opposed to having guns properly stored, properly locked, and out of the hands of kids, and buying ammo online, untraceable, you know, under the current system by kids? Those all sound like pretty sensible, sane things. I don't see a problem. And if somebody has a problem with what I've said here, you know, too bad, because that's how I feel about it. So I really could get behind what you're talking about. It sounds pretty common sense. What kind of opposition do you have to these kind of measures? Because it's not anti-gun. It's just being sensible about the whole thing.
It was real. It's gotten better now that I have a lower tolerance for bullshit. Mm-hmm. But it was really bad in the beginning that people would tell me, well, how dare you stand on your daughter's grave and you're going to take away my guns. And I just keep repeating it that I'm not going to do that. I'm not seriously, like, there's so many guns in this country, but there's no way we'll be able to round them all up. Like, I just tell them I'm anti-stupidity with guns, Yeah.
So it sounds
I'm against stupid shit. Like, that's not hard.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I'm going to go back to Uvalde. I think that after Uvalde, the kid waited until he was 18, and then, within a few days after his birthday, he made the purchase. Mm-hmm. And we keep seeing all these shootings, and it's young white men that go and do all these massive attacks. Mm-hmm. And, I think the easiest thing to do is to raise the age. You already have to wait till you're 21 to go out and get drunk. I don't see why you can't wait till you're 21 to buy a gun. It's 3 years.
I get your point.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it must be very frustrating to have this irrational counterattack, if you want to call it that, saying you want to take away my guns, when that's not the discussion. The discussion is, of course, guns are a constitutional right, but let's make it safe and sane to where adults are buying them who have been properly trained, who have proper background checks, aren't criminal, have a criminal mindset. And I've got one buddy, he in fact, he's down in Texas. He's got machine guns. He's got all kinds of stuff, but this guy is incredibly responsible. He flew jets for the military, and he handles them all impeccably well. And so I would trust a guy like that to have high-powered rifles, but an 18-year-old kid who can buy ammo online without tracing it, that's insane. And I've seen the effects of mass shootings with the high power rifles, and it's mind blowing. It's like a cannon.
So I usually do this speech in the halls of Congress when I'm lobbying. So big piece of advice: if you ever go to Washington D.C. and you lobby, make sure that you get a hotel with a continental breakfast, and then take like a couple pieces of fruit and like a bagged pastry, because you're going to be so busy lobbying, you won't have time to eat. And that's your snack for the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. But I always make it a point to grab an apple from my breakfast bar, because when that round exits the AR-15 and it's been fired, it can travel for 300 meters to 500 meters. And then it's going to enter your body. And I take the apple, and it's got that neat little fruit bud at the bottom.
Sure.
Or like where the stem goes.
Yeah.
And that's about representative of how that AR-15 round enters your skin. And then when that bullet enters into your flesh, it explodes to the size of an apple.
Yeah.
And so people don't know. I did that speech live at March for Our Lives for the first time the other day.
Yeah.
But I usually save it for halls of Congress.
I get it.
But people don't know. You can watch it on YouTube, and they'll fire an M16 into like a square foot of ballistics gel, and it annihilates the ballistics.
Yeah. No, it's mind blowing. I mean, the holes I saw were just unbelievably large. Yeah. And again, it's not anti-gun. It's anti-stupidity. I liked your comment there. So go ahead, please.
And people are coming around now that Uvalde has happened, and they realize that it's just so easy, and those kids were so obliterated.
Yeah.
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 There's I hate to say it, but that Uvalde was definitely like a turning point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love how you've really gotten, how much did you really know about guns in your prior life driving buses? I mean, did you know much about this whole topic?
No. So I shot obviously when I was in the Army, and then I maybe had gone to a range or two once or twice between leaving the Army and my current life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not my thing. I just don't enjoy it. It's just, I don't like the smell of it. It's really stinky. It's really loud. It's just not my thing.
Right.
But when you're forced into something like this, you kind of have a way of becoming a subject matter expert. And so you do a lot of research. And I already knew how devastating the AR-15 was, or the M16 was on the battlefield, because that's what it's made to do. It's made to incapacitate the other guy until his medic can't get there, you know? So I just tap into really from my my military experience. Although I do have to laugh. This is hilarious. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a couple of years ago, put this ad out where she was doing a fundraiser, and she's like, buy a raffle ticket and win this 50 caliber, da 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 da. And homegirl is down there laying in a prone position with a sniper rifle on a 50 cal machine gun. And I'm like, that's not how you do it. And she didn't have hearing protection. She didn't have eye protection. She's got her face like right next to the butt of the gun, and she shoots it. Like, she's lucky she didn't knock out her teeth.
Yeah.
Because the way the 50 cal is supposed to be on a tripod, and someone sits and they have their hands on it like they're driving a car, like on a steering wheel, and they put their feet up on the tripod a little bit. And I was just like, girl, you're so stupid. You're lucky you didn't get hurt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. You could literally knock your teeth out with those things. Yeah. I had a case in Guam, of all places, and they had a place where you could go shoot every gun imaginable, including machine guns. And you got to have a lot of respect for those, because they are very high power. And again, it's not anti-gun. It's just safe and sane gun control. It's not taking away people's guns. So, I totally with you on that. Okay. So, another tip is, and right now, Rhonda, as you're talking, you remind me kind of Denise Brown, because she became very, very, very educated on domestic violence, and you've become very, very educated and have an obvious command of the gun control issues. So in the aftermath of a tragedy, it sounds like a lot of people have kind of a phase where they really get in and roll up their sleeves and study the deep intricacies and get into the weeds and the details of their topic, of their subject matter.
Yeah. And you almost have to do that, because like, there's nothing like sitting in a meeting with Senator Ted Cruz. This actually happened. I finally got a meeting with Senator Ted Cruz almost 2 years after the shooting. It was February of 2020. And the rumors of COVID was happening, but we didn't know exactly that it was COVID. We just knew there's this lingering bug. Anyway, so he was like, well, you know, cities like Chicago have a really high gun violence rate, but they have a strict gun laws. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, we're going to talk about Chicago. So you really have to, and these guys like to think that they can talk us out of something, or that they can talk us down. And you really have to be able to outsmart a senator or a representative, which honestly, with some of these things, it doesn't take too much. But you need to go in there, you know, pumped and primed and ready to go with these guys. You go toe to toe with them. Good
for you. I mean, I don't really have a dog in the fight. I'm a registered independent, for the record. But I think it's interesting that you're not cowering in the face of political power. That you have your principles. They sound sensible to me, and you're not backing down, even though somebody has some looming title. That's just not your thing.
I am surprised though, like for as much as I've called out Ted Cruz and even confronted him in public a few years ago, I am surprised like I'm not on some kind of like government do not fly list. I know that in Ted Cruz's office, they do know who I am. I called them recently and like, yeah, I lost a daughter in Santa Fe. And they're like, yeah, we know who you are, Rhonda. Like, ooh, who's got the power here? This chick. So there is something to be said for like emasculating some of these guys, which is just delightful.
All right, I'll take your word for it. Okay, so what tips at this kind of phase when you're kind of learning about stuff and you've obviously have your 4 or 5 principles of what you're looking for. If you sit down rationally and think about it, and you're fighting the kind of the ignoramuses out there that have all kinds of misguided preconceptions of what you're really all about. What kind of tips do you have for somebody that's going through their thing as far as what you've learned from this whole process?
So again, you don't have to engage in every fight that you've been invited to. Mm-hmm. Like I just said a couple minutes ago, if someone starts to bring up Chicago and gun violence to me, I'm like, you know what? You're too far gone down that rabbit hole. I'm just going to end this conversation right here. Like we're done, I would definitely tell people, you don't have to engage in all of the fights. You don't have to learn all of the gun violence numbers, off the top right away. Just like take your time with it and do whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah. But at the same time, like keep going because, the minute that you say, well, I think we should ban AR-15s and the guy, someone inevitably will say like, well, you don't even know what AR stands for. I was like, yeah, it's the brand name of the company. Mm-hmm. It's Remington or whatever. But yeah, and don't let it get to you. Like, just don't. And yeah, that's my advice. Just don't engage don't negotiate with terrorists.
I gotcha. So, I mean, you are going to State of the Union events. You're in Nancy Pelosi's office. You're having sit-down meetings with Ted Cruz. Do you talk for a minute about the need for you or what need you have or don't have in terms of taking breaks and self-care and, taking time off from your activism? Is that play into it at all? Or are you always turned on to 100%?
No, I do turn it off like around the holiday, usually between like December to January. I try not to do anything. I usually try to take the month of May off. It's just a really hard month. And then usually like around Kimberly's birthday, because Kimberly's birthday is August 12th and mine's the 19th. Mm-hmm. And so you try to take like that week off and just have some downtime. And, like I was doing good for my downtime in May this year. And I had set up I had talked to my therapist. I had set all my little care plans in motion, and I had friends come down and whatever. And then Uvalde happened after, it was 6 days after our milestone of 4 years. Mm-hmm. And that just sent me into overdrive, So I did like a lot of interviews right after Uvalde. Okay.
So, and I know you have legislation that tell us, and you were in People Magazine about it. I read about. Mm-hmm. Talk about kind of the status of the legislation that you're working on and have worked on, and. So
Kimberly's bill got passed in June early June. It was like the first Wednesday of the month, I think. And so we sat there and watched it. We were in Representative De La Rosa's office, which is like a stone's throw away from the House chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was history. It was the first common sense reform that had been passed in 30 years. And so it got passed in the House, and then it got turned over to the Senate, and it's still stuck in the Senate side.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if it stays on the Senate side, then so be it. We can't get a lot through the Senate these days anyway. And then I'm just kind of taking some downtime. My work is going to get really busy. I had got COVID in August. I had used up all my PTO. So I'm kind of like building up my PTO and stuff again for another trip to Washington, D.C. But there's always like a rotating, you know, like with Newtown Action Alliance, we have like a core group of activists, and we all kind of like take turns so that, you know, if one family needs a break, then the other one is ready to come in, and, you know, like we just like tag team each other. And so right now, several of the Uvalde families are with Newtown Action Alliance, and they're very, I mean, they're still very upset. They don't know left, right, down, or sideways. And so having, like I said, all those meetings that you get, it's very cathartic. And so I'm ready for that. They can have that. They can have those meetings. And then when they get tired, I'll just like step in.
Interesting. You know? Okay. And this is kind of a ticklish question, but I got to ask it. And that is, you know, there's like lots of things. There's kind of a spectrum of beliefs here, or positions, I should say. Some people don't care about guns. They just don't care. Some people are, you know, extreme. Everybody should have a gun, you know, put them put them in the grocery stores, and everything in between. It sounds to me like your position is pretty reasoned, pretty sensible in terms of, you know, guns should be available, but they should be available to adults who don't have criminal backgrounds and all the things we've talked about. Are there some extremists on the far, I don't know if you want to call it left or right, whatever it is, that want guns, no restrictions on guns, that kind of get away of your more sensible agenda? Are you negotiating that issue as well, or are you more just focused on your thing?
No, again, there's a certain level of people that I just won't engage with.
Okay. Yeah.
And that falls into that category.
Okay.
You know, there's like when we were lobbying in June to get that package of bills passed, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert were like making this big deal. And Marjorie has this thing, like she's out for David Hogg. I don't understand why she's obsessed with a 21-year-old kid, but whatever. But we knew, like, as a lobby group, we were like, there's just people we're not going to negotiate with. We're not going to waste our oxygen on. And those extreme far right people are just on that list.
Okay.
You know, we know who the core group of like Democratic supporters are, and we keep track of who are the Republicans that lean towards gun reform. Like bless her heart, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska supports common sense gun reform.
Yeah.
So we do work with her. Like, she's great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But we know who deep down is on the list of, you know, like, we don't engage.
Yeah. I mean, with a lot of politics and a lot of organizations, I see it as a dichotomy between loyalty to the organization or loyalty to the party versus integrity. And a lot of people will, you know, the loyalty to that party, to that organization trumps basic common sense and integrity. And, you know, Washington is such a freak show in my mind.
Yeah.
And everybody says, you know, somebody says something stupid and it's like, well, you think that's stupid, watch me. And they see something double stupid.
Yeah. Hold my beer. Yeah.
Yeah. And then triple stupid. And then watch this.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of clowns instead of just integrity. to common sense principles that the forefathers designed with. So there's my little speech for the day. But that's got to be frustrating to watch. But it sounds to me, I love your comment that I'm not going to waste my oxygen on the extremists on either side. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay focused on my principles, honoring my daughter, Kimberly, and just an integrity to that focus and not wasting oxygen on other things. That's a great tip. I hadn't thought of it that way before. That's really useful. So what else are you kind of doing? And you're clearly in the thrive stage. I'm sure you still profoundly miss your daughter. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
But you're channeling it in such a way that I'm sure she would be very honored and proud of her mom for doing.
So another very cool project that got started in honor of Kimberly was it would have been her 16th birthday one summer. It was the summer after the shooting. So 2019. And it would have been Kimberly's 16th birthday that year. So sweet 16. And inevitably people were asking me, what should we do to honor her birthday? This is like a milestone year for you. And I know it's very complicated. And I said, you know what? We're going to make the best out of a shitty situation of my daughter's death. And I said, why don't you guys all just donate cat litter to the Dickinson Animal Shelter, Bayou Animal Services? And so that's what happened. One of my friends donated like 250 pounds of cat litter to the shelter. And then they got toys and money and treats and carry. It just turned into this great big thing, right? This amazing thing. And in after her birthday in the fall of 2017 or 2019, they broke ground on a new building, brand new construction. And the shelter director, we had been talking on Facebook Messenger, and she's like, you know, Rhonda, come out to this little press conference. We're going to have a little talk, And so part of this new building is they have two separate cat colony rooms. They have like their main cat kennels, and then they have two special rooms. And one of them is for cats that have feline leukemia, FIV. And so those cats have like a weaker immune system. They can't be living in a house with cats that don't have FIV because it's very transmissible. You can have 2 or 3 FIV cats together, but not an infected and a non-infected. And so there was no resource available in Galveston County to house those cats. So if they got brought into shelter, most of the time they were going to be euthanized. And so when they finished construction on this new building, this little cat colony room for the sick kitties was named after my kid. And it's Kimberly, because she loved cats. It's Kimberly's Cat Haven. They've decorated it in Harry Potter. Every year we like have her little birthday party there. For that week, they do like cheap adoption prices. I do a little fundraiser for them every year. Like this year, I raised $1,000 to help a little kitten get her leg amputated because she needed a leg surgery and the shelter just couldn't pay for it. And so, and then with Kimberly being a Girl Scout, there's been another young woman that was in the troop with Kimberly, and she did her Gold Award project there, which is the highest award a Girl Scout can earn. And so it's blossomed into this like beautiful thing. And I work in domestic violence and human shelter. And when I need a quick serotonin boost, I go over to the cat shelter and sit down and play with the kitty cats. So I never thought that would happen, but that is also probably one of the coolest things to come out of this tragedy. And like the city of Dickinson participates in it. And yeah, it's just it brings me so much joy.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds so cool. Well, you know, I think you know this, but we got you, we learned about you specifically from People Magazine. People Magazine, we Tanya has some connections there. And one of the reporters, we were looking for really, one thing about our podcast is we have great guests. Can't say so much for the hosts, but our guests are awesome. and People Magazine, one of the reporters there told us about you. And, you know, you obviously have this great energy. Did you know you had this in you when you were driving buses before the whole tragedy?
Yeah, I did. This is when I was driving bus, this is pretty much how I was. I always say that I'm extra. Like I'm a avocado. I'm extra. And we did a thing at work the other day where we had to go around and introduce ourselves and how long have you been here and one personality trait. And I was like, I'm Rhonda and I've been here 6 months and I'm just weird. Like I am. I'm weird and silly and goofy, but I also have a really big heart, you know?
Yeah.
And I used to, when I was a school bus driver, I earned driver of the year 1 year from our insurance company, and you have to like submit an essay. I won support employee of the year from the district, which again is like another, you have to be nominated by your peer group in your office. And, you know, then the district looks at you. And so I've always been like this person that, you know, I always try to just make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And just treat people properly. And, you know, so yeah, this is just an amped up version.
Yeah.
You know, my family were Harry Potter fans and Kimberly was a Ravenclaw. And after she died, I got a tattoo from the books, that the quote that says, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." And it's actually from 1 Corinthians. It's a Bible verse. I know that. But in the Harry Potter books, it means that you live, the life of the person continues on despite them being dead. And when I got my tattoo, I just thought that, oh, it'll be things like I pay for somebody's Starbucks, or I tell them to have a nice day, or, you know, I pay for parking or whatever. I never thought, you know, 4 years ago that I would get, you know, like actual legislation passed in my daughter's name. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah. That is huge
literally
deal.
Life-changing. Yeah.
Not
So
a lot of people can say
never
that
thought.
they've done that.
Yeah.
So all this weirdness is paying off.
It is.
That's awesome. Hey, shout out to all the weird people.
Yes, hang in there.
So yeah, that accomplishment to honor your daughter, the legislation, and it sounds like the fight's far from over. That you're a solid activist. You have a wonderful cause. It's common sense. I think any reasonable person that puts ethics before loyalty to their party or loyalty to their cause or whatever, you know, extreme position would find this very palatable, very common sense. What does your future look like, do you think?
Well, right now I work pretty closely. Like I'm in contact with Beto O'Rourke and him running for governor, and I support, you know, Texas Democrats all over the place. Honestly, after I met with my congressman in June, and he was such a douchebag. Like he didn't even bother to read Kimberly's bill, and he just voted no on it because it was about gun control.
Oh, brother.
And then when I told him what her bill encapsulated, he was like, well, I don't want to support it because I don't want to make a gun manufacturer do anything that's outside of their job from making guns. And I was like, you dirtbag. So I kind of want to run for Congress against him.
Huh.
Because he goes, He's like,
awesome.
again, he's a huge dirtbag, and he'll be like, I support veterans. And I'm like, dude, I've looked up your vote history on veterans and you've not supported us one single time.
Wow.
So I ran for school board at one point, and I'm thinking I want to run for Congress. And then I've also told Beto that if he wins, he needs to create like an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in Austin. And he needs to have actual gun violence survivors as staff so that we can work on changing some of these issues. And I've hinted to him a few times, like, hey, you need to hire me.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just going to keep, plugging along in my job that I have right now. And I'm just going to keep, volunteering with Newtown Action Alliance and any other little gun lobby group that, wants to work with me. And I will probably never shut up about gun violence until we can get down to where we have zero mass shootings. My goal would be so that we don't have any mass shootings anymore, that we could end it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I was doing some of my research, the US stats, and I don't have them fresh in my head, but the US stats are really sad. They're pathetic, honestly. But one of the school shootings I looked at, in fact, I actually flew out there and went there, was in Scotland. It was a Scotland school shooting.
Yeah, they had one school shooting and ended it.
Yeah. And it's a whole different deal. And, you can get guns in the UK, but it's just a more sensible way of looking at things. So yeah, it can be ended, or the dial can be turned down, considerably at a minimum.
Yep.
That's the goal. But it's interesting. So are you making an announcement for Congress? Or you're just kind of
not officially. Okay. No. I'm still thinking about it. No.
Okay, good.
Because my friend is running against the guy right now is running against my congressman.
Okay.
And our election is not till November.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So no, it's just something that I'm really, really considering, because it takes a certain amount of guts or lack of, let me take that back. It takes a certain amount of testicular fortitude to look at a mom who's lost her kid and say, I don't think that gun manufacturers should do that. So I countered him and I said, but as a female veteran, you're going to force me to have a pregnancy that I might not want because you voted against female veterans having access to birth control. And then he was like, well, Ms. Hart, you put words in my mouth. No, I didn't. That was your vote. I just can't stand the guy. He's scum. His name is Randy Weber. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're in my district, Texas 14, vote against his ass, please.
Okay. There we go. I don't know him, but
he's so awful.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact that you're focused, you have your principles, you call it the way you see it. And I can't respect a person that doesn't actually read the bill that they're voting on.
Yeah.
That's
and they don't.
Insanely inept. My kind of North Star, it's Aristotle blended with a little of me, but it's egos, logos, pathos, and duos. Ethos is it ethical? And I don't think it's ethical to vote on something you haven't read. Pathos is emotional. Does that make sense to talk to the mom who lost a daughter in that kind of ignorant way? That's not the way anybody should be spoken to. And then egos, logos, is it logical? Does it make sense? Clearly, he wouldn't know if it made sense or not because he didn't read it. And then duos is looking at both sides of the story. Always looking at both sides of the story. He didn't do really any of those. So there's a bad example for you.
Yeah.
And we can learn a lot from bad examples, can't we? It's not just the good examples. So yeah. So you've been very, very gracious with your time. I want to say thank you to People Magazine for putting us in contact with each other. I want to restate my sadness and condolences to the Brown family for what they're going through. And we miss Tanya because she brings a wonderful energy to these interviews. But I'm going to just give you the last word to share with our audience, whatever you'd like to share about this journey you've been through, and what kind of tips you might have for those who are working through a trauma.
Go to fucking therapy. I can't say this enough. And therapy is not fun, but do it. It really will change your life. And just know that at some point it does get better, and you can learn to carry your burden better as the years go by. Definitely.
Beautiful. Well, Rhonda, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I've learned so much from you, and you do. And whatever advice, don't listen to any of my advice. But one thing, stay weird. I love your personality.
Yeah.
No, we need more weird people.
Totally.
I like to think I'm weird, but I'll keep trying. So thanks again. And we're here at Post-Traumatic Thriving, where we dive, survive, or thrive, and the choice is yours. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for supporting our podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on your favorite social media. For books, merchandise, or to donate, visit CoreIQ.com. Post-Traumatic Thriving is produced by CoreIQ, a nonprofit with a mission to teach the life skills we all need but are not taught in school. CoreIQ and the Post-Traumatic Thriving podcast are for informational purposes only and do not provide medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your licensed medical and mental health care providers.